be stressed.
Yeah.
And just, okay, now that you know you're stressed, now what are we going to do about it? And I'm like, he blew my mind because I thought when you got to a certain level of life or success or whatever it was, goal attainment, all of a sudden, no stress. And I know that in my head to be illogical, but I guess I had been harboring that as a hope that, if I get to this certain place, I wouldn't be stressed. But
All right, everybody, welcome back to From Stress to Success. I'm really excited today. The lovely lady I have with me is a co-founder of SOS and Simpl.AR. We're going to get into that. She's a woman founder, and she's deeply passionate about sort of promoting women in tech and women in the entrepreneur space. She does a lot of speaking around that. She's a runner, and we're going to get into the mindset behind that and how it goes with business. A fractional CFO for some other companies in the Calgary ecosystem, a fiber artist, which if you're curious what that is, you'll have to pay attention to listen for a moment as well. And to top it all off, a mom of 2 lovely children. Thank you so much, Alisha, for spending some time with us today and jumping on here. I really appreciate it.
thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, it should be really good. I want to quickly, because there was a lot in that title. So again, you're a very busy person. You're doing a lot of stuff. So thank you for making the time to come in today. I need to ask, and I'm sure people listening are wondering too, what's a fiber artist?
That's a good, it's like it's like a professional quilter. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I quilt and crochet and knit and embroider. And during the pandemic, I wanted to um do that professionally. So I took on I did like 8 custom projects. I had a client in Connecticut and a couple clients locally where they had these very specific quilts and things that they wanted created, and then we went through the whole like consulting process with them, and then I got it done.
Amazing. I love that. I love that it's just like this extra thing that you guys are doing. So those of you listening, I had a conversation with Joel, who's the other half of both Alisha in their marriage, but also in their business. So it was a
Mhm.
really interesting conversation. And I'm excited to get into some stuff with you on there. Now, if you listen to that last podcast, we talked a lot about boundaries because both of you are very, very busy. And right
Mhm.
out the gate, actually, I'm really curious now that we're talking about this being a fiber artist and all these things that you're doing. How do you juggle all that? How do you make sure that you have time for your kids, for your business, for your other businesses to run? Like, how do you find all the time?
I don't. You gotta let go of you gotta let go of a lot of stuff. And I think Joel said like family first is our number one thing. So, when we were starting our business, I set aside I'm in my studio here. I set aside all of my stuff. I just put it in a bin in the basement and just was like, we're in a period of life where having a hobby is not realistic. So I put it all away, but not begrudgingly because it was a choice, and I knew that one day I would have the time. I mean, that's the goal of having your own business, is that you can have flexibility and do all the things you love to do. Yeah, and eventually I brought it back and became a professional. So, yeah, it's kind of making choices based on priority. So, I stopped my consulting work as a CFO because we have 2 businesses now, and outside of the kids and staying married, those are my 2 priorities. So, yeah, one day I'd like to contract CFO again. I really enjoyed. Oh, notifications need to be turned off. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Yikes. Um,
I can't
so
hear
one
them,
day I'd
so
like
you're
to
good.
do it again. Oh, good. Okay. One day I'd like to do them again, but it's fine that I'm not doing them right now. So just the 2 businesses and the kids. That's what we're focused on right now.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're able to make that decision upon, okay, these are the things that are important right now. I need to put this stuff away. What allows you to make those decisions so clearly and so concisely?
I think that I don't know if Joel and I are just like, we were good at the beginning when we got married. We were like, what do you want out of life? I said, I want to
Mm,
have kids and travel. And I said, what do you want out of life? And he's like, same. And so it was really easy then. Like if there's ever a question, are we going to do this or that? We always just kind of go back to the original intention. And so it's easy to make decisions around that. And
it
uh,
sounds like right away that you guys are very aware of your values
mhm.
and you understand what those are and you kind of use those as guiding beacons.
Yeah. I mean, in the immediate, like it's about keeping, and Joel's kind of taught me how to do this because I'll get really wrapped up in the like right now in the day to day, and he's more of a visionary, big thinker, long term thinker. But for us and in our business, thinking long term and comparing that to what we need to do right now. So, for example, I would love it if we would both love it if we had more consistent marketing strategy, but we're in a startup phase and we don't have marketing professionals on our team. So we're doing it and doing the best we can. But when it comes down to the day to day, my top priorities right now are making sales and fundraising. So
Mm,
that I do those first. So we base our time based on what the most important things are right now, and then everything else is extra, and it's a nice to have. I mean, people would
yeah,
argue
okay.
that marketing is like super essential, and it definitely is. It's just like when we're like, in order for this to be a thing 5 years from now, I need to hit my sales targets this month. So I'm going to do that first. And then I'm going to put together some posts after that.
Yeah, the marketing
Yeah.
plan and stuff. This actually brings up an interesting thing that a lot of, I think, entrepreneurs and certainly people in startups, small company founders have to deal with is that wearing many hats, right? Like right now, you're saying, I have to figure our sales out. And then 2 years down the road, I'm going to have to figure out our marketing plan. And then we're going to
Hmm.
have to go and look at our finances. And then I'm going to have to hire. And I'm going to have to wear all these many hats. How does one learn to do all these things? Because what's interesting, before we started recording here, you mentioned that a lot of the stuff that you do is self-taught. So do
Hmm.
you look forward and go, okay, I'm gonna have to do some selling soon. That's the next, because you guys are really good at looking forward. Do you then go and buy sales books? Do you listen to certain podcasts? How do you do that self teaching that you seem to have done so well?
For me, it's about so okay, 5 steps back. If you take a look at like what people give out as like really good advice, it's like starting before you're perfect at it, or before you're even that good, or even before you understand it. So if a lot of other successful entrepreneurs are like, okay, well, I started this process without knowing exactly how it was going to go down, then I have to take that as fact that that's a common thing out there. So if I trust that, then that means I can go out on a sales call not really knowing how it's going to play out or what the exact right process is, and I might look like a fool in the meantime, like completely ridiculous. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'll procrastinate by over preparing. So I will be too scared, and instead of being like saying, "Okay, you're just being chicken," I'll be like, "No, I'm preparing," and I'll read all the books and I'll read all the blog posts, and then it's a week, 10 week or 10 days later, and I haven't made a sales call. So for me, I can't go down that road. I just have to be okay with the fact that I'm probably going to look like an idiot and just do it anyway. And then the next time I'll do it better, and the next time I'll do it better.
I like that. It's this powerful concept that I'm a big fan of, which is that idea of having to get the reps in. You have to just start and you have to
Yeah.
get those reps in. And yeah, you're gonna mess up and you're gonna make mistakes when you first start. But
Hmm.
I guess the alternative is what you just described, which is that deep rabbit hole of like, I don't know enough yet. Because we constantly think
Yeah.
that, well, we never know enough. But it's like, no, just take what you know and start. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you learned that from seeing a lot of other very well known entrepreneurs and people who do startups and stuff like that who make
Yeah.
those same. I don't even want to call them mistakes necessarily because I don't think they are. I think they're learning opportunities
Yeah.
that they've taken to kind of to do those things. Let's pivot here really quick because I want to go back to something kind of interesting, and that's something that I didn't quite cover with Joel, so I want to cover with you actually. Is you guys were married before the businesses existed,
Yeah.
correct?
Hmm.
How did then you guys start a company around charging solutions? For those of you
Hmm.
listening, SOS Charging Solutions provides mobile charging platforms essentially at events. How did that even come about?
I was a stay-at-home mom, and Joel was working at TELUS, and he was a mortgage broker part-time, and that was what we were doing. And he would go to conferences either for TELUS or as a mortgage broker, and he would spend like $800 on a ticket, $1,600 I think on a ticket, travel there. And then he was like, this one very stood out in my mind situation was I was trying to get a hold of him because Jesse had a really high fever. He was expected to still at least check his email and do some work on his phone and take in the content at the conference. And he was like sitting on the floor back then when he wore suits, like in an expensive suit, charging his phone. And he said to me, and he's like, "Why is there free Wi-Fi for me to use and no way to charge my phone?" He's like, "This is ridiculous." It was so frustrating for him. So he's like, if I'm having this problem, I can safely assume that lots of people are having this problem. So I'm going to go about solving it. And I was very risk averse. Um, and I was like, what are you talking about? We have like two little kids. You already have a job and a half. Like, what are you doing? And also, I was not having any of it. I'm like, this is not me. I'm not doing this. And he, uh, he was just like, no, I really think I have something here. And I thought, like if I don't support him trying, then he's going to be, it'll be 20 years, we'll be married, and he'll be resentful that he never got a chance to at least try. So, okay, whatever, just let's try. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, he ordered cell phone charging equipment, and it came in the mail. And um, the very next day, I was getting groceries, and I came home from work, and or from dropping the kids off and getting groceries and stuff, and he wasn't supposed to be there, and he was there. And it was the beginning of the recession in 2013, and he had been laid off.
Wow. So
Yeah.
kind of right when both of you said, let's make this pivot, let's make this change, kind of
Hmm.
life went, hey, you have to now.
Yeah.
You have to do this.
So I really like have compassion for people who are kind of caught in their own mindset of like, I can't make the leap. It's hard. We've been pushed into all the leaps that we've made, and they've all
Yeah.
always benefited us. Like I think I mentioned I have like a college diploma, but I don't have a degree in business. And I think this is exactly what I want to do when I grow up. I just had no idea that's what I wanted back when I was 18.
Mm-hmm. What's
So it was
really
very
interesting about
lucky.
yeah, what's really interesting about that is two things. A, one of my favorite quotes that I kind of generally live by is from one of Jim Carrey's speeches to I can't remember what school now, but he said that you can always fail doing the thing that you don't want to do. So you might as well
Hmm.
try that thing that you want to do. He had a very similar story about his dad who had this super stable job and ended up getting laid off from it.
Hmm.
And it sounds like, and I think a lot of people get stuck in that, right? Where it's like, oh, but right now I have what I have is stable and it's good. And so they never kind of look outside of that. It's interesting that you guys did look outside of that. What's also interesting, though, is that it sounds like neither of you had started a business prior to. You didn't do any like, you didn't go to any boot camps to be an entrepreneur or a startup. You just said, we see a problem, we know we can solve it, and you took that leap, and that well, you were pushed onto that leap. And what's interesting here is that there's two different viewpoints that a person could have when this happens to them. They get laid off and they've just started a company, and that could be seen as being very, very stressful, an issue. Oh my gosh, how do we do this? Or you could look at it as an opportunity. You guys saw it as an opportunity, and I'm kind of curious on like why you took that approach, why that mindset.
I will correct you and say the first time it was definitely not seen as an opportunity. It
Okay.
was seen as our only option. So I had been out of the workforce for 7 years with the kids, and I wasn't going to be able to get a job. And all of Joel's mid management tech sales and facility, these were all jobs that were being eliminated due to the recession. So for us, our only option was to make this work. That was it.
Interesting. So you
So it was
push into that
highly
corner.
stressful. Yeah. It was very, and it was
Mm,
very stressful. I did not have a healthy mindset around stress or risk or any of that. I have PTSD, and it was undiagnosed at the time. So, um, just it wasn't it was a very stressful time. It was really
interesting.
really
Okay.
stressful. And then when the pandemic happened, and we were like, how is this happening again? We had hit year five. We were ready to grow. We were ready to get our inventory into the United States. We kind of knew what we were doing 5 years in. We were so excited. March 2020 was going to be the best sales year in the history of our business. And it all went away in 36 hours. And we were like, how is this happening again? And the one thing that changed there was instead of just making a decision about what was right in front of us, which was the charging business at that time, we took a breath, took a beat, and said, what we decided that we were going to pretend like this was a 10-year like Great Depression. That's what was going to happen globally. And so we were like, what do we do now that makes sure we're not winning next year, but like we're winning in 10 years?
Mm.
So we started making all of our decisions based on what puts us in the best position 10 years from now, knowing that the only way to get out of this was going to be patience, because we're and a lot of people were going to go way down before they got back up. And so just kind of like the idea around strap in and make strategic decisions, not panic decisions, and then just ride it out and see what happens. um, that would be
Yeah.
the
So
difference.
you
Yeah.
really you really approach it with like the mental fortitude of like, this could take us a decade
Yeah.
to recover from, but
And
you
we
go
might
in,
not.
but you go in knowing that,
Yeah.
versus that's really interesting. See, I'm an overly optimistic individual, so I tend to have a hard time going into something with that outlook, being like, I'd be like, no, we can turn it around in like a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
Is so that that mental fortitude, that ability to do that and to have that, because it's what's interesting is Joel mentioned a lot of this. You both have this ability to look really far, but yet you're both dreamers. And it's what's
Hmm.
interesting is, I guess, where how would be a better word to use. How do you maintain the ability to be a dreamer but also be very realistic?
I would say, I see, I even disagree with Joel there. I think he's very future thinking. Well, no, I guess we both are, just in different ways. I think he's future thinking in a dreaming and what's possible, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm future thinking in what's practical. And
Okay.
he's very optimistic. I used to be a pessimist. I think I'm a realist now. So I think um, what allows us to do that now would be evidence. So I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday, and he says, like, I don't have confidence, I have evidence. So I noticed that one thing that made me feel better in times of extreme stress was like consolidating our gains, like not financial gains, but what had we accomplished in the past. You make a really big number sale, that's evidence that you can do it again, right? So you just have to do it once and then you can keep doing it. So then when we had kind of made something really beautiful out of the first job, the first business, I had evidence I could do it again. So that afforded me a certain level of sometimes comfort to say, like, I could probably do this again, right? If I had, like, there's no manual for how to restart your business or to start a tech startup in a pandemic after your other one. Like, we couldn't read a book about that. So we just had to take it as evidence that, okay, we've done something hard before. We could probably do it again. And like what
Mm-hmm.
served us well then was taking small steps, not waiting too long, willing to make mistakes, willing to look like a fool. Like all these things that served us well the first time, they kind of came back into play when we started Simpl.AR.
That's it's neat that you're able to look at that. One of the big things I always tell my clients to do is something very similar to what you've just said, which is like take that backwards audit, look at where what you've done, what you've gotten to. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, I can't do X, Y, and Z thing. I'll never be able to do this and that. And it's like, well, how about we look backward and see what you have accomplished? And then you can use that as both a learning opportunity, both as kind of building that little bit of momentum, and use that to move forward. It sounds like you guys did that when kind of you launched Simpl.AR, because you mentioned that March 2020 was supposed to be like, that was supposed to be it. SOS Charging
The
Solutions,
month.
it was going to be
Yeah.
great. We chatted in a previous conversation. You said 2018, 2019 was your biggest year yet. Everything was
Yeah.
on the up. And then obviously COVID hit many people kind of by surprise. I think probably everybody, if you didn't get hit by surprise by COVID, I'd be amazed. Um, when I was talking to Joel, he said that if it wasn't for COVID, Simpl.AR probably wouldn't have happened.
Hmm.
You wouldn't have had the time. You wouldn't have been, again, kind of pushed to do something new. Do you share that same thought?
Yeah, I do. Um, I really do. I think I would always hear, like, you hear on podcasts and stuff like how comfort is like this great enemy to innovation and personal growth. And especially with having PTSD, I really like comfort. I felt that I was risk averse and all these kinds of things. And in this kind of Simpl.AR um, journey, the past, I would say the first 4 or 5 months of this year have been the hardest ones yet. Just a number of really weird um, incidents coming up within the business and personally was a high stress first half of this year. But this was the first time that I was able to view it as um, that kind of a high stress situation as something that refines a person and to
Mm.
kind of embrace it because then you come out smarter on the other side. You know, when you're in these high stress situations, you realize how far you can kind of like quote unquote push it and push to the limits without going over. So it's really just I was just trying to remember that it's just practice um, for the next time because it's going to be stressful again. There's going to be hurdles and hindrances again. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think I would have been too comfortable to take this on the way that it needed to be without the pandemic providing us with a lot of time.
Yeah. I love that you kind of touched there on the fact that you looked at it and you realized that the stress that it's creating can be used as a fuel to drive the creation of this new company. Is that something that starting SOS Charter Solutions, being a mom, where did that understanding of like, I can push myself farther than I may have thought I could, where did that come from?
I started running like a year and a bit ago after I dealt with and got my diagnosis, and I needed to. I'm not a runner. I'm not an athlete. I just signed up for a half marathon because I needed to prove to myself that I could do hard things that took a long time. And honestly, that was the cheapest
Mm.
sport available for me to join at the time. And so I started distance running and long distance running, and it kind of taught me that it gave me what I needed. So, Alicia, you can do hard things that take a long time that are uncomfortable physically. Like it kind of reinforced that idea that I could do that mentally as well. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that it taught me I wasn't looking for was that you hear from again like from people saying that they really enjoy running, they get a runner's high, it's not painful and excruciating and I hate every minute of it. Like I knew I knew that if I practiced I could enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it. Like I only enjoyed like 2 runs last year and I did 2 half marathons, and it was really like I am a very slow runner. I didn't know how to run. It was really humbling to have to like learn something from scratch essentially as like a kid and try and figure out how to do it. Um, but it proved to me that I can learn to like stuff. This year, all of my runs I've really enjoyed. I want to go out and do it. Um, I'm not forcing myself anymore. And that really came into play this very stressful period because I learned that this might not feel great, but I can appreciate it for what it is, which is like a learning time, at a season of life where you have to rely on other people, you have to be more vulnerable, things like that. And it was a period of time where my blade was getting sharpened. So it
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't mean you sleep better, but it just allowed me to understand that when everything was over, I was going to be, a million percent ahead of where I was before. And a lot of that came from like the running, but also like just like I said, being more vulnerable. So I actually asked, mentors of mine, like, I need extra time with you because I'm really in it right now. And talking to them about stress and um, managing it and seeing the benefits in it, that was all stuff that I had to learn because learning a lot about you and I both listened to Huberman Lab. So I even like went down to like what's actually going on in my brain. I needed to understand what was happening in my mind to make this stress so horrible. Um, so I could understand it objectively with a little bit less emotion attached to it. So I
Mm-hmm.
just tried to learn as much as I could and reach out and talk to people So now I'm actually, I mean, I don't want things to be horrible, but the next time the shit hits the fan, I almost will be like, I know it's temporary. Like I'll go into it even stronger because I'll know it's temporary and I know it's a refining period, and I'll kind of welcome it to be like, who are you going to be on the other side? Because every time this has happened, I look back and I'm like, did you see what we just did? Like that's fucking awesome. And I high
Yeah.
five myself and then we keep going. So it's kind of exciting in that regard, I guess.
I love that you've touched on a couple key things in there. The fact that you are able to look at it and understand that macro wins don't necessarily mean you don't have any micro losses. And I
Yeah.
think that goes with both business, but mindset, stress, health, everything, right? Like you've enabled yourself to look at something on a macro level, and identify what the micro differences are, but to give you a macro gain, which is incredibly huge, and I think something really valuable that people can kind of start to try to do themselves as well, right? Is look at it on a macro level, because let's be honest, when it comes to things like exercise, I hate running as well. I feel you entirely there when you said that. I was like, yep, I'm the same way. I remember talking to my cousin and she was like, it's great. You get this runner's high. And I was like, no, my feet hurt, my legs hurt, my lungs hurt. I hated
Yep.
every minute of it.
Yep.
I don't run anymore. um, but that's really interesting. And also that changed your mindset to look at things, to understand that friction and that stress sort of is a cost, but it gets a payoff of something. Something
Mhm.
comes because of that payment you've made of that
Mhm.
hardship or that trying time. And I think if you don't get those, you generally don't get the payoff of it, which means that you never grow, you never change.
Yeah.
Um, and it's amazing that you've sort of identified that within yourself, and in your business. I want to go a little bit to talking about just jumping back to this whole self-taught thing,
Oh yeah.
because I think this comes with that understanding of like I have to sort of put a certain amount of work in. What do you think drives us to feel the need to validate that we can do something before we actually do it? Do you know what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah, I think
Like, why
it's
do
I
we
think it
spend thousands of
so
dollars to
much,
get a college
yeah.
degree, for example, before we actually prove that we can do it in a workplace?
For me it's fear-based. So it's like um if I decided that I wanted to be a CFO, and then I went and tried to get a master's degree in finance, and I wasn't able to because it cost too much, took too much time, I failed my classes, etc. Well, then that's the reason that I didn't do it. And I'm pretty sure somebody coined the term already. It's like I call it like radical accountability,
Mm-hmm.
when really there's no excuse or reason that we can't do whatever we want in life, because all we have to do is just go and do it. But I think if we put these prerequisites in place, then we give ourselves a multitude of opportunities to stop, give up, say it's not for me, change our minds, and then all of a sudden it's not my fault that I didn't do it, right? And
Okay. Yes.
yeah. So if I decide that, I want to be a business owner, own my own business, and can't get a business degree, well, then that's the reason it didn't happen. Instead of just, once you realize that you just have to go out and do it and try and start, then there's no excuse not to not to realize your dreams, and either succeed or fail. But um, I think that level of accountability is really scary because it was scary for me.
I love the way you put that, because an interesting. I had a conversation with Mitch Jacobson from Revita Teas.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the podcast recently, and he said the same thing. He was like, "I just Googled how do you start a beverage company,
Yeah.
right? Because it puts the ownership onto you. If you don't figure out it's onto you, it's not. You can't have an outward source that says, hey, you didn't do this because
Yeah.
you didn't get a high enough grade in this course or whatever like
Mm-hmm.
that." I think that's really interesting. I want to ask as well. This is totally came into my brain here, but what do you think, through being an entrepreneur, through being a business owner, through all these changes and all these ups and downs and stuff like that, what do you think are some of the lessons that your kids have learned from watching you
Yeah.
go through it?
Yeah. That's funny.
The reason I
I
ask is
think,
because I
yeah.
grew up in a very similar situation. My mom was, still is, very entrepreneurial. Took a lot of took a lot of risks, made a lot of successes. So I certainly learned a lot from that, and so I'm curious
hmm
on what you think your kids have learned or will learn.
That's a really good, well, that's a good question. So like my grandfather was an entrepreneur and he had a giant meat packing plant that serves all of North America and into Japan and stuff in small town Brooks, Alberta. And all of his stresses really um, resonated with my mom. And he used to say to her, "Don't ever start your own business." So she and my dad were very like, you go,
Mm.
you work for the same company, and then you retire. And they're very conservative in that part of their careers. My mom is entrepreneurial. She's a dog trainer, and she has, she doesn't work for anybody. So, but in like a safer space, not in a like a tech startup-y way. Um, and then when Joel and I are going this route, so it's complete opposite again. So now we're going full on entrepreneur, own your own business stuff. Um, Even though that's not really what we were raised with. And I think what that's teaching our kids is um, that they have permission to do things their own way. Um, I think I think it opens up. I hope it creates less fear in them because then if they because they've seen that I hope they've seen that even if their careers don't go the way they want them to, that they can just make their own career. They can make
Mm-hmm.
their own job. So I hope that provides them with a certain level of comfort. And then I think it even on a subconscious level, I think what they're mostly getting out of it is just seeing um, Joel and I build something together and knowing that, in they say with these new generation instant gratification is very detrimental, like that expectation that things just happen. I hope that that's kind of counteracting that, where they're seeing that when we do something it takes a long time and a lot of effort and you got to put in the reps and then eventually you get the reward.
Mm.
I hope that's kind of rubbed off on them. I was talking to somebody who shall remain nameless, who's always wanted to be like an entrepreneur. They've had some business ideas, but they've got a young child, and that person um, feels the weight of responsibility of parenthood as something that's holding them back from taking the first step and just ripping the band-aid off. One of the parents is fully employed, has a great job, etc., but they feel selfish starting their own business, guilty about the potential economic impact it could have on the family, worried about how they're going to explain that to their family when they're saying, well, okay, one parent's pulling their own weight, but the other parent's a freeloading entrepreneur. All of these things that come into play when kids are involved. So I was trying to help them understand that, like, you're going to be teaching your kids a whole different set of lessons they're not going to get at school. Um, it wasn't the end of the world that our kids didn't have iPads when the rest of the kids had iPads because we were taking a limited salary. They learned to color and like at restaurants instead of using their iPad. Those things didn't hurt our kids, and like when they were little, again, when we first started SOS, we were taking limited salary. So there wasn't money for big activities, but they had swimming lessons, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they have a deep appreciation for what's in front of them, not um, upset at what they don't get. And would that have happened if we both had really great jobs? Probably not. So there's all these kind of incidental things that your kids learn along the way that you don't intend to teach them, but I'm glad it happened this way nonetheless.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A lot of those things you said in there are very similar to, I think, what shaped a lot of my outlook on life.
Mm,
That's what I was taught for sure. Was it was like
yeah,
I was the same way. I never had the fancy things, and
yeah,
my
me
first
neither.
gaming console I had to buy because my
hmm
parents weren't about to buy one for me. But that taught me to. I love that you said appreciate what's right in front of you, because I certainly have that. And I know it's been fostered through me through seeing it in my parents, and it sounds like it's going to be fostered in your kids. To pivot this a little bit again, we've talked a lot, we've touched kind of briefly on this whole understanding of how we approach stressors in our life. And I
hmm
know this is a big thing that we've chatted about sort of off this call and in person and stuff. But for you, kind of now versus 12 years ago, 10 years ago, before SOS charging solutions.
Mhm.
What has changed for you anyways on how you approach stressful situations?
Um, so factoring in the mental health diagnosis, how I would approach stress 12 years ago was a lot of avoidance, um, a lot of sleep, a lot of sleep. It would be mentally exhausting. Um, I was shaking a lot. I would shake a lot. I didn't have a lot of nightmares. Wasn't really able to kind of like, aside from take care of the kids and like take care of the basics, I really didn't have capacity for even going out and exercising. Like that was beyond my capacity at the time. Now, um, definitely I'll eat my words the next time, the shit hits the fan, but seeing it as an opportunity is definitely um, different. Celebrating that, getting through it, and the things that I was able to do within the stressful times, like accomplish, celebrating that. I don't think I celebrated my accomplishments 12 years ago at all. Um, and then just having an understanding of the elements of choice. So we can't choose our physiological response, we can't choose our upbringing, we can't choose whether we're struggling with mental health or not. We can't make none of those things we can choose. However, we were listening, you and I have talked about this one a few times, listening to, I think it was Huberman or somebody, but um, the same thing that happens to your brain and body when you're stressed is, it's the same if you're a zebra getting hunted and someone's going to eat you, and it's the same response in the lion that's out to hunt. So, I can't help the fact that I'm feeling panicked or waking up panicked every day for 3 months. I can't help that. But I can choose whether I take that feeling and turn it into, like, I'm going to use that to hunt today, right? So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
use that to make 3 sales calls and do 3 admin tasks that have to be done, just something to move the dial forward in my business and my personal life. Um, or whether it's going to cause me to curl up in a ball and stay in bed and not face the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I a lot of self-talk. It sounds like, if I said what I say in my head out loud, I'd sound like a crazy person. But um, I have to say it, like, say sentences like, "You are okay. Everything's gonna be fine. You're really strong. You're smart enough to do this. You just have to figure it out." Like, I repeat stuff to myself constantly, over and over and over again.
Do you ever say it
Eventually,
out loud, or you only ever say
yeah,
it in
I
your
do.
head? Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
when
No,
people
I'm
are
I'm, I'm glad you do. Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah. And it's funny how, like, I'll do that during stressful times and then I come out of it and I'm still talking to myself like this and I'm like, "Oh, I am that good. Oh, I can do this." Right? Like, it does
Uh,
work. It's ridiculous, but it works. But yeah, but just the choice around, okay, so I'm super stressed, but I can choose how I come to work. I can choose whether I go for a walk, that's a big one, right? Or a run, like getting outside. I can choose whether I go to bed on time. I can choose all these things that kind of mitigate that stress response. Those are all choices.
mm,
So, kind of giving up and letting go of the fact that you're in a stressful situation and being kind to yourself. Like, I remember somebody, a mentor of mine, he's in his 60s, and he was like, "Do you think this doesn't happen to me?" I'm like, "You're so accomplished. You're this, that, whatever." He's like, "Man, like, I still get really stressed about very specific things." And I'm like, "Oh," so he's like, "You got to wrap your head around the fact that this is your life. You
mm,
get stressed. You will get stressed from now until the day you die. So just stop trying to not be stressed."
yeah.
And just, okay, now that you know you're stressed, now what are we going to do about it? And I'm like, he blew my mind, because I thought when you got to a certain level of life or success or whatever it was, goal attainment, all of a sudden, no stress. And I know that in my head to be illogical. But I guess I had been harboring that as a hope that, if I get to this certain place, I wouldn't be stressed. But that's not the case. So he really forced me to wrap my head around, how am I going to deal with stress? Because otherwise, this is going to be a shitty life if I'm just
Yeah.
stressed and I don't do anything about it.
Yeah, no. Obviously, as who I am, I'm a huge proponent of that way of looking at it. It'd be weird if I was doing the show and I wasn't, or doing the
Hmm.
job I do and I wasn't. What
Right.
I find interesting there is something that I've been doing a lot of and practicing as well. When you get that feeling of stress, panic, anxiety, or something like that, I just read recently, to just remind yourself that you feel that way because what you're dealing with matters a lot to you.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and that one's been really big for me, especially with the newborn. Obviously, newborns are stressful, and there's moments when they're crying, or I'm trying to change the diaper quickly, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I
Good
get
luck.
that you get that feeling inside you, right? That almost that tension, so to speak. And I
Hmm.
am now consciously saying to myself, I'm like, oh, it's because I care so much about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's why I'm feeling this way.
Yeah.
It's not a negative thing. It's showing how much I care for what I'm doing. And I think as entrepreneurs, it comes across with your business and what you're doing, because we briefly touched on this a while ago when we were chatting. But as an entrepreneur and as a founder, you don't ever get to step away from your business.
No.
You're there all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is what increases the stress, so to speak, to people, because they are so passionate about what they're doing. So the
Hmm.
emotions levels are higher. And I think that's something people need to remind themselves of. It's like, oh, I'm feeling more stress towards a business that I'm building because I really care about it.
Hmm.
Whereas, yeah, when you're an employee, you can kind of just be like, it doesn't really matter. But as an
I think you have
entrepreneur,
to
you don't
get there
have
as
that.
an entrepreneur because I think you have to almost get there to be where you have to realize that. So like, um, I like to say like, or I've heard somebody else say, and I like to remember that feelings aren't facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm an entrepreneur and I can't step away. But the fact of the matter is, Joel and I are shareholders of the business that we operate in. So we have every right to say, okay, as an employee of SOS or Simpl.AR, I'm allowed to have time off. I'm
Mm.
allowed to rest. I'm allowed to not look at my email. If I wouldn't like that, it just to stay sane. We're allowed to do those things, right? Um, so getting to a point where also um, I'm glad we never named anything like Olandesca Enterprises because it was apparent after a while that you get tied to your business, especially Joel being more of the front facing um, aspect of our business that this isn't his identity. There are so many other
Mm.
things that are a part of him or are that are part of his personality that aren't his business, and for him to not tie his identity to his business, because then if the business fails, he fails, right? And that's not necessarily the case. There's so many reasons why businesses fail, and you can really try really hard, put in the reps, and then certain external factors like a pandemic can wipe you out, or just a shitty cash flow situation, or lost two key customers, and then all of a sudden you're done. If your whole identity is your business, well, then you failed as a person. And honestly, if somebody going out of business, I would say would be really shitty, but it's not a quote
Mm.
unquote failure. I would still say that's something to celebrate and be proud of, that you tried and you have this thing going. We saw that a lot during the pandemic, where in our industry live events, there's a huge number of creative professionals. And a lot of people who are creative tie their identity to being a creative. And when they didn't have the opportunity to flex that muscle, it's very jarring and disorienting to be like, I can't do that thing that comes so naturally to me. And it was very difficult for creative people to not be able to do that anymore and have it so tied to their livelihood. So
Yeah,
separating yourself is essential, I
I
think.
really like that, because it's interesting. When I chatted with Joel, we talked a lot about how well you guys put up your boundaries for your work, and it shows that you guys have the ability to have sort of other careers, other passions, a healthy relationship, kids, which I think is interesting, because I think a lot of mainstream society tends to tell us that we need to go all in, right?
Hmm.
Everything, you need to live, breathe, eat. Everything has to be about your business. But what you guys have shown is that that's not the case at all, and you can have, you know, you can achieve a level of success, or at least outward looking success, without completely devoting every waking minute to your business. And
Hmm.
the secret to that, or one of the secrets anyway, seems to be to have those clear defined boundaries. So how important are those boundaries to you?
They're super important. And I didn't even realize we were like setting boundaries when we started this was, what I was and wasn't willing to do. I'm like, okay, we're doing this, but like something I'm not willing to do is remortgage my house. I'm not doing that. I'm not putting my kids' home in jeopardy for an idea like that. No, it doesn't matter how much I believe in Joel, just those other external circumstances could swoop in, and then where are you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we set that boundary in early on, and Joel's like 100% yes, that's my boundary as well. When you set those boundaries early on about what you're willing to do and not do, um, it meant that you had to like it kind of gave you like a field to play in, right? So once you set up the fence, it's like, okay, now I'm in this field. I can use what's in here. And one of those things was, if I'm not going to cash flow my business on a home equity line of credit, well, I better get really good at making sales.
Yeah.
So
And
you
so
better go
again,
sell, or else
it
that's
pushes
it.
you to do that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Amazing.
when I was contracting during the pandemic, I thought I think women deal with this too. It's like being bossy or perceived as bossy. And so I just decided I didn't care if I was being bossy. I was going to set boundaries with my clients. And so I would tell them, my kids and my family are first. Second is my own business. So if I'm giving you
Mm-hmm.
8 hours a week, uh, it's not at the expense of my own business, because I'm trying to build something here. And a lot of them, I also said, I won't be answering text or email outside of like 8 to 5, these time limits and on the weekends, etc. And a lot of them were like, this is such a relief, because if somebody doesn't set those boundaries, they'll call or text when they're doing their work, because they're entrepreneurs. So they're working after hours, and they didn't know they were crossing boundaries, and then things get muddy and things get stressful. So I just realized in that regard that um, setting boundaries was not only important for me, but appreciated by the other person. And now that we're growing and we have more contractors working with them, I'm really upfront about, like, you're kind of our first couple of contractors. I've never really done, like, we have Mike, our employee, but I've never really done this en masse before. So I'm looking to you to set boundaries, and I'm going to set boundaries, and that now we know where we stand with each other. It's come in really handy. So now setting boundaries is not difficult at all, because
Mm-hmm.
it's been so beneficial in the past.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I have to, I told it to Joel, but I have to commend you guys on your ability to set those boundaries. It's an incredible thing. And the fact that you're doing it so successfully is amazing to see. So hats off to
I
you
think
guys
it's
for doing that.
self-preservation.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you're probably right, right?
Yeah.
You're doing it because you almost have to again, right? Which
Yeah.
seems to be a common thread, which is really
Yeah.
fascinating. I do want to ask you really quickly as well. I love asking my guests this. Is I'm a big proponent of it's daily habits and daily things that really make things work, right?
Hmm.
So if you could give us three things that you do that you try to do on a daily basis that help you set the stage for your day, help you keep these boundaries, help you have this healthy life that you do have, like what would three of those things be?
I feel a bit like a hypocrite, because for the past couple of weeks I've fallen off of my habits train um, quite a bit. But for the most part, I try and move every day.
Yeah,
Um, whether it's like going for a walk or a run or strength training. I try and read a book made of paper, even if it's just like 3 pages. Um, I start my day with a really big glass of water.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Somebody called it an internal shower. I like that.
Oh,
Uh,
I like that
yeah,
too. I hadn't
you
heard it
have to have,
before.
they're like, if you're having a regular shower, have an internal shower. Um,
Hmm.
I always kiss my kids in the morning. It's really important. So I go and smooch them. Um, Ideally, when I'm in my ideal space, which I'm trying to get back to, I usually journal as well. And so I usually
Yeah,
read and journal in the morning. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
between those couple of things,
I love that.
that's what I think a successful day is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've
Yeah.
moved, you've hydrated, you've shown that gratitude towards your kids, and then I love that journaling is something that I've been on and off with, and obviously having a kid has thrown my whole days
Yeah.
into a random having to redesign my schedule, which is fine. It's part of it. The last question I have for you um, is sorry, I have two last questions for you. What do you sort of deem now as being successful?
Mm,
Like, what would success look like for you now?
I don't even know anymore, because at first dealing with stress, so like you, for people who are not watching this, like, you're on a straight line, right? And everything's going good. And then something bad happens and you get thrown off to the left, right? But then something good happens and you get thrown off to the right. And I think the key to success is staying in the central. So not being like all my happiness and feelings of accomplishments hinge on the wins, and all my self-worth and whatever hinges on the things that go wrong. It's, I think a lot of people say like loving the work. It's success to me is like is just staying the course. And it's like, why are you doing this, right? Because I don't know if it's going to succeed or fail. I don't know if it's going to be a business that we sell in the future. I don't know all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really even have a good definition of success except for if I'm happy and healthy. And
Yeah.
I've got those things. So the only reason I can think of to be an entrepreneur, if I'm not hinging it on financial success, um, for me, success looks like um, if I'm happy and healthy, so check mark. What drives me right now is how many jobs can we create in the local ecosystem
Mm.
where people can come and work for, like, I think we're okay people, like some nice people, do what they love, get paid
Yeah.
appropriately in a fun work environment. That's my main goal right now. Is like, how
Yeah.
cool would it be to be that kind of employer? Because people are so upset with their jobs. They hate the 9 to 5, they hate the grind. But some people are not built to be entrepreneurs, right? So if I'm built to be that person that can take those risks, what can I do for other people in our economy, local economy, to provide an opportunity for them to do their best work, live their best lives, that kind of thing. So that more and more becomes a measurement of success for
I
me.
love that.
Because
Yeah.
I would just love if people worked for us and they were like, I love
And they
my
were
job.
happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
And
just
they
want
were
to make
just
people
happy.
happy.
Yeah. And they just like
It's
go
amazing.
camping on the weekends and, you know, hang out with their kids and
Yeah.
not, I'm sure, there's always stress. That's unrealistic. But um, yeah, just a place for people to flourish. I think that's my
Yeah.
measurement of success right now.
I love that. That's a really great answer to provide, that level of a space for people to be happy with their jobs is a
Hmm.
really cool thing to look for to kind of merit your success off of. Last question is, if you had to give people one lesson, so one thing essentially that you can say, here's what you need to do to be, to lessen your stress in your life and to find more success. What is that one thing? If you can only pick one.
I think changing, a lot of things that happened in our life, in our marriage, and our careers were external factors. So we were lucky enough to be forced into certain decisions, and we had to do this. But aside from that very first push, everything else was a choice. Like every day after the first day, we're choosing not to go get a job.
Mm.
We're choosing this, we're choosing that. All the rest of that stuff was choices. So technically, we didn't have to do any of this. We had to deal with the situations that were presented, but everything else was a choice. And looking at your circumstances through a lens of I get to versus I have to is life changing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I get to own my own business. Um, I get to raise teenagers. I get to go for a run. I even just having a really shitty run, like somebody said, like there's no such thing as a bad run. If you're in a space where you can run around your neighborhood safely, you have the capacity to move your legs and breathe in air. You have time in your day where you're not working a third job, right? Or dealing with a sick spouse or child, and you're out running. That's how you're spending that's a great run.
Mm-hmm.
So, just understanding that no matter what happens, we have many choices, many options, many opportunities. Nothing's not fixable, as our bookkeeper likes to say. I messed up payroll really bad once. Nothing's not fixable. Um, all those things, choosing to come to work knowing that you have a million options, you're not stuck here. No one's
Mm.
forcing you to do this. All these things really um, turn life from being an obligation to uh, just like more of an expression of joy. these
Yeah.
choices that are really beautiful. That's that's what I think.
I love that. That's a big thing that I try to do often is that remembering to say this is something that I get to do versus I have to do. And I think it's even small things. I try to remind myself of, oh, I get to do the dishes. The fact that I
Yeah,
have hot running water, like
it's a miracle.
yeah, exactly. I need to feel very grateful for that. So I really like that. I think it puts a different perspective on things for people. So I hope
Yeah.
people remember that as they go about the rest of their day here. Lastly, Alisha, where's the best place for people to find you if they want to find out information about Simpl.AR, about SOS Charter Solutions? Maybe they need some quilting work done. Um,
Yes.
where's the best place to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is the best place. Or my email address, Alicia at soschargingsolutions.com.
Love it.
Those two are the most reliable. Yeah,
Perfect. And I'll drop those links into the description of the episode here. So if you do want to get a hold of Alicia,
cool.
have a look, go in there, shoot an email, add her on LinkedIn, get your quilting made, and get a charging pad for your event all in one fell swoop.
It's all in one.
Be interesting if you need both of those things. That'd be
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You'd be the perfect customer.
Exactly.
I want to thank you so much, Alicia, for making the time and coming on here, providing us with so much value here today. I really appreciate you having on here. On here, it really shows your level of authenticity to come forward and how you've talked today. So I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening as well. We've certainly appreciate you guys spending the last hour or so listening to us chat here. I encourage you to check out anything else on this channel. Like I said, check out what Alisha and SOS and Simpl.AR are all doing. They've got an amazing newsletter. Actually, I'm going to include that in the description of this as well. Thank you so much for listening, guys. And remember, go out there today and remember, above all else, that this is all something you get to do, not something you have to do.